We are determined to kill their anti-voter legislation and protect all Texans' sacred freedom to vote. But it doesn't have to be this way. The reality is Republicans control every lever of government in Texas. They have for a generation now. Greg Abbott has control of this process, and he could change course if he's willing to admit his mistakes and make a change. The problem is, so far, he appears to continue to just have all the wrong priorities. But the reality is the governor is in fact the governor. He's not a tyrant, he's not a dictator. That's not our system of government in Texas. It's a give and take. It's a governor and a legislature working together to come up with policy. And so that's why halfway in the special session, the governor has the choice. He could change course. First, he should agree to restore the funding for the legislative branch and agree with us that nothing else would be done until the legislature is fully funded, and take that blackmail attempt off the table. And as you all know, we are pursuing that case in the Texas Supreme Court as well. But the governor doesn't have to wait for the court. He could take action on his own. Second, we would urge the governor to put aside his campaign considerations and political posturing and focus on the real solutions that our constituents, who are also his constituents, are demanding. Solutions like fixing our power grid, so no more Texans die in their homes in extreme cold or extreme heat because the state can't keep the power on. Solutions like expanding access to affordable health care in a state that has the highest rate of uninsured in the entire nation, so Texans don't get sick and die prematurely from untreated chronic conditions that are very treatable if they simply had access to health care. And the governor could begin to lead on COVID-19. We know, unfortunately, that in Texas, only 43% of the population is fully vaccinated. We have plateaued in vaccinations in Texas. And cases are up, hospitalizations are up. This new Delta variant is highly transmissible, and that is driving the spread of COVID-19 anew to that. Ms. Thompson wanted me to assure people, because one of the news networks mixed it up the other day, but she's perfectly fine and healthy.
Yeah.
And we're so glad she's with us. That's right, has not been sick at all. But unfortunately, too many people around the country, including our beloved state of Texas, are getting sick because they are not vaccinated. And so the governor could use his platform, his leadership, to lead a charge to overcome the immense vaccine hesitancy that we're seeing in populations around the state of Texas, to get people protected, to keep people out of hospitals, and to save people's lives. Those are the things that the governor should be focused on. Those are the things that all of us would be more than willing to sit down with him and any other Republican colleague and work on together to find solutions that work for our constituents. So to conclude my comments, we hope the governor will set aside the partisan politics. We hope he'll put away his blackmail threat with Article 10 of the budget, and we hope he'll work with us on real solutions. In the meantime, and until he does, we are committed to continue our fight to protect the freedom to vote for all Texans. We're going to continue to use our voices here in Washington, D.C., and we're halfway there, and we're looking forward to finishing the second half. And now it's my privilege to introduce my good friend and the chairman of the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus from Dallas, Chairman Rafael Anchia.
Thank you, Chris. And I want to thank the brave Texans and American patriots behind me. When we met with Vice President Harris, she made it a point to call out this patriotic defense of the freedom to vote by the members that I am proud to stand with today. I wanted to just let you know a couple of things. First, that the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus is the oldest and largest Latino legislative caucus in the country, and we have over 40 members in the Texas legislature. And we are united as a group to fight the unrelenting attacks against American democracy. We feel that these attacks are really unprecedented, especially coming from within. We haven't seen anything like this since the Civil War, and they're unconscionable. People who overtly are trying to subvert democracy, whether they be insurrectionists or passing anti-voter bills in furtherance of the big lie. And this anti-voter legislation, I wish I could say it was novel, but it has darkened the doorstep of many state capitals throughout the country. And we have, in Texas, long suffered from anti-voter attacks from the Texas legislature. In fact, during the last decade alone, 3 different federal courts across this country have found the Texas legislature in violation of the voting rights of Texas, not once, not twice, but 10 times, repeatedly, in both strict photo identification and in gerrymandering, and rigging the rules, essentially, of our elections. And so when we come to this current session, where again we have bill after bill after bill filed in the Texas legislature, more anti-voter bills, more bills that attempt to restrict the freedom to vote than the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th states combined. We had to take bold, necessary action to stop these bills. And that included having to leave the state from during the regular session, leaving the chamber during the regular session to pass a bill that even Republicans have now walked away from. Even they have disavowed provisions that they were willing to put in the middle of the night and were willing to pass, not only pass, but also defend on both the Senate and the House floor. Now they're saying they don't know how it got in the bill, even though they talked about it on the House and Senate floor. Now they're saying that there were typos. Now they're saying it should have been AM as opposed to PM. And they walked back those draconian anti-voter measures. And so that in the regular, the special session, just to set the stage, we had the brave members of this caucus sit through 24 hours of testimony from concerned Texans. That was 6-1 against these anti-voter bills. And people who came from all over the state to express their concerns about the attacks on our democracy. Republicans did not even let the bill sit out for the 24 hours that our constituents came and testified against the bill. They immediately, and on a partisan basis, and without any Democratic amendments, passed that bill. With no regret, no remorse, and in furtherance of the big lie. So we really had no choice but to take this bold action. And we would really love to be back with our constituents in Texas. We love Texas. And we love this country. And we would ask Republicans, like Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, to put politics aside. Greg Abbott, stop worrying about your reelect. Stop running for President of the United States. It's the worst kept secret in Austin. Let's not pretend that the special session agenda is anything but a paid political commercial for you. So let's stop with the politics. And instead, let's work on a bipartisan basis on a bill that strengthens our democracy in Texas, which is one of the states that is hardest to vote in. And because we were rebuffed from that, we had to come to Washington to fight for meaningful federal protections, for meaningful federal voting rights legislation that would protect the vote of millions of Texans. And so this week, we pivoted. In addition to doing our work on Capitol Hill, meeting with members of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, we also heard from secretaries of state from across the country who, instead of attacking people's freedom to vote, are helping eligible voters in their states gain greater access to voting through online voter registration, expanded vote by mail, drive-through voting, and to make our elections more accessible and more safe. And it's time for Congress to listen to these brave patriots behind me, and to listen to a vast majority of the country, by the way, who are demanding us to pass federal pro-voter legislation that stops anti-vote, anti-democratic, and autocratic governors like Greg Abbott, who are deliberately erecting barriers to our freedom to vote because they engage in politics and fear the outcome of future elections. Thank you. And it is my great fortune to now introduce a sister in arms, someone with whom I get to work closely on a daily basis, and a fantastic Texan and representative of her community from Tarrant County, and that is the Honorable Nicole Collier, head of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus.
Thank you, Chair and Chia, for the information, for laying out the facts, because we did have a chance this morning to hear from legislators from other states like Arizona and Georgia, and what we learned is that Texas has been giving out the playbook. There is a concerted effort across this country to mimic the restrictive laws that Texas has implemented when it comes down to your right to vote. So we're here in Washington because it's not just about Texas, it's about America. But today I wanted to just take a little time to talk about the human factors that are part of this movement, and why we're so committed to making sure that no matter what the risk is, and no matter the sacrifice, we will continue this fight. Now, you know that there's members of our caucus who represent solid blue districts, and then there's those who represent purple districts. And you know, what I notice and admire about them is how they've held their position to protect the freedom to vote above any title that they have now. And that's because they know, like I do, that this fight is not about us. We know it's about people like Crystal Mason, who we had the pleasure of hearing from earlier this week over Zoom. Now, Crystal Mason faces a 5-year prison sentence for submitting a provisional ballot that didn't even get counted. This is while she was on federal supervised release. Now, Crystal was never notified about her ineligibility to vote. And then also, we heard about the recent story of Hervis Rogers. Now, Hervis Rogers waited 6 hours at Texas Southern University to cast his ballot. He finally voted at 1 a.m., and this was in the March 2020 primary. But this was only 3 months before his probation ended. Now, he made national news for being the last person in Texas to vote after working 2 jobs. But 15 months later, while the country watches the attack on our right to vote, Hervis Rogers has made an example by Republicans to support their big lie. Now, keep in mind, you heard the hypocrisy that Representative Anchia mentioned, and this is even further evidence of the hypocrisy. Well, we live in a state where our own Republican Attorney General has been under indictment for fraud himself. If only justice was swift. But Texans are subject to criminal prosecution and multiple years, prisons, sentences for making honest mistakes while voting. It's shameful. So we will not stop fighting for Crystal Mason, Hervis Rogers, or anyone else in the same situation until we can continue to protect the freedom to vote for you and for all of America. At this time, I'll turn it over to Chair Turner to take the question and answer time.
Thank you, Chair Collier. Thank you, Chairman Chia. We'll be happy to take a few questions. We'll start when we have journalists joining us via Zoom. We will address questions in the room first and then go to Zoom. Anyone in the room? Sir?
Give us an update on the COVID situation. I know y'all took some tests. Were there any more positives? Are y'all all negative? And you hope to start in-person meetings again?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The question for anyone who didn't hear, update on the COVID situation. So there have been no new positives in the last 3 days. The last positive was Tuesday for a total of 6 in our group. We continue to do rapid testing daily for all members and support staff who are here with us, and they've all been negative for the last 3 days. So I should say that the members who did test positive are all doing very well. They are quarantining in their rooms, so I think their biggest challenge is perhaps going a little stir crazy, understandably. But we are making sure that people are bringing them food and books and other things to kind of occupy their time. But in terms of their health, they're all suffering very mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. In addition, as Representative Cole just reminded me, we had George Washington Hospital come in the other day, contracted with them to do PCR testing, which is the more accurate testing for everybody involved, and that also did not reveal any additional cases. So we're proceeding, we're being cautious, we're going beyond CDC guidelines to protect the health and safety of our members, staff, the hotel staff, and others in the hotel, and we feel good about where we're at.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to emphasize to the President, I'm Sophronia Thompson, that I have been vaccinated and I've never been ill, I've never got COVID, I've never got any of the variants. I know they went out over the news a while, but I am healthy, very healthy.
Yes.
We're so grateful for that. So, yes, ma'am.
What happens if you don't ultimately manage to score one? I'm worried that this, weakens your position in the Congress, or people walking
No, not at all. Look, we're in continuous contact with the White House. I've been trading phone calls with them today. We've had a great partnership with the White House. We're fortunate to have a lot of Texans working in the White House that a lot of us already knew from years past. And look, Vice President of the United States has met twice now with Democratic members of the Texas House and Senate just in the last 5-week period, which is frankly an extraordinary statement about the important work Democrats in the Texas legislature are doing with respect to voting rights. So we have a great relationship with the White House. Obviously, we welcome the opportunity to have additional meetings, including with the President, but we'll just stay in touch with them, and we look forward to continue to work with them. What's important is our shared commitment for members of our caucus, President Biden, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, James Clyburn, and other congressional leaders to pass in strong federal voting rights legislation to protect the right to vote, protect the freedom to vote for all Americans.
Chris, if I can follow up.
Sure.
Just to add one data point for you, that on the date of our first quorum break, the president, who is the leader of the free world and president of 330 million people in this country, turned his gaze to the Texas Democrats, who in their walkout, he acknowledged our efforts, and we know that deep in his heart he has a great reverence for voting rights, and that's been communicated to us very, very clearly. The last thing I'd mention is that the day after our arrival, he gave his historic speech at Freedom Hall, and I don't think it was any coincidence that our activities over the last 5 weeks have helped him sort of comment favorably on what we're doing.
Yes, Carrie, go ahead and give us some more questions from Zoom.
Sure. So Eleanor Dearman with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram asks, how many House Democrats are still in D.C., and are you aware of any plans for members who are in D.C. to return to Texas?
So, thank you for the question, Eleanor. There are 56 members of the Texas House Democratic Caucus who have signed letters locking their voting machines in the Texas House and instructing the House not to unlock them until we've given them permission to return. We have over 50 Democrats with us here in Washington, and we have well more than enough members to maintain this historic quorum break and to continue our fight for the freedom to vote for all Texans and for all Americans.
Diane with CNN asks, halfway through the special session, what do you feel are your tangible accomplishments aside from stopping the current special?
Thanks, Diane. Well, the first tangible accomplishment is we have halted all progress in this current special session, which was our primary goal when we left. So, as I say, we're halfway into it and halfway to our goal. So it's a major milestone that we celebrate today. In addition, there is no question, as Chairman Anchia just said, that our collective voices in this caucus have elevated the issue of the urgent need for federal voting rights protections now. And we have heard that repeatedly from congressional leaders over the course of last week and this week in our meetings with them, that our presence here, our strong actions both at the end of May and especially now in this special session have accelerated the urgency for Washington to act and get legislation to President Biden's desk for his signature. So we feel like we are making definitive progress, and we're going to keep at it.
And then Jasper with the Houston Chronicle asks, if Governor Abbott does restore funding for Article 10, are there any ways Republicans could amend House Bill 3 to make it more acceptable?
Well, there's a lot of ways they can amend House Bill 3 to make it more acceptable. The good news is that they don't have to start from scratch, because Democrats have been providing those ideas for months, going back to the regular session. And the reality is that Republicans so far have consistently rejected those efforts. We've said you can't have unfettered access for partisan poll watchers to roam around polling places and harass voters and election officials. But they keep that in the bill, and further they say somebody who does that, potentially committing a felony, gets a warning first before they're even removed. They can even make it harder to vote by mail. They make it harder to apply for a ballot by mail. They make it impossible to do drive-through voting or conduct overnight voting. What they should do is say, you know what, our elections are safe, our elections are secure. Those are the words of their Secretary of State, Greg Abbott's Secretary of State. And we don't need to pass a bill that's based on a lie. This bill is based on a lie that Donald Trump somehow lost the last election due to widespread voter fraud, which everyone knows is false. And until Republicans are willing to stand up to Trump and stand up to the big lie, we're going to continue to have this problem. So that's ultimately the problem they're going to have to fix.
Justin Miller with the Texas Observer, is the plan to return to Texas when the special expires, and what does that mean for a potential second special session?
Yeah, Justin, well, what we've said repeatedly is that we are committed to killing this bill for this session and using this time to use our voices on Capitol Hill and in Washington to advance the national conversation around national federal voting rights legislation. So that's our plan. That's what we've said from day one. That's what we're going to continue to do. Again, I refer back to my earlier comments with what Greg Abbott should do with respect to this special session or any future special sessions. You got to focus on the real priorities facing our state: healthcare, COVID-19, the grid, and when he does that, we'll look forward to working with him.
And last question, and this is both from Emily with the Dallas Morning News and Priscilla with NBC asking similar ones. What is the plan for next week? Do you all anticipate holding events virtually, or will we see more in-person events or meetings?
Sure. Thank you for that question. And let me just say, reflecting on this week we are concluding today, we have had an excellent voting rights conference that our members have participated in each day, Monday through Friday, and it's been very instructive to our members. It's given us a lot of good ideas to be able just to interact with policymakers from other states, secretaries of state, other state legislators, and leaders on the issue of voting rights to understand new policies we can bring back to Texas. And hopefully our Republican colleagues will work with us to make it easier to cast a ballot, easier to register to vote in Texas, where it's already very difficult to do so. So we've had a very productive week this week. Next week, we do anticipate continuing our meetings here in Washington. I anticipate it'll be certainly starting out some virtual meetings, and we'll look forward to hopefully being able to do some in-person meetings as well. In addition, I want to add, and perhaps another member would like to comment on a personal experience on this. What our members have been doing in terms of serving their districts, they've been working incredibly hard in staying in touch with their districts throughout these last 2 weeks. I know I did a virtual town hall meeting last night with my constituents in Arlington and Grand Prairie. I know a lot of other members have done the same. Different county delegations have come together to do those types of outreach events. So that kind of work is continuing, and members are keeping up with updating their constituents and letting them know why we're here, what we're doing, and addressing a variety of other issues unrelated to the current special session back in their districts. Representative Crockett wants to share a
I am Jasmine Crockett, State Representative for House District 100 in the heart of Dallas. And I think the elephant in the room, we already heard a couple of questions as it relates to COVID-19. As you can see, we are going far beyond what is required of us. And that also includes our service as well. We have gone far beyond what probably many of our Republican colleagues are doing, to be perfectly honest. We are not only making sure that we study up and we know what we're talking about when we talk about this bill, unlike so many of our Republican colleagues. We also understand the impact that these bills will have on real people, and we're able to communicate that, not only to our constituency, but also to lawmakers on the federal level. So many of them have benefited from us being present here and explaining to them how Texas is different, say, from West Virginia, and how much more difficult it is to vote in Texas versus West Virginia already. We also are making sure that our constituents do not feel neglected, because there is a rhetoric that for whatever reason we have run away. We have not run away. I am actually a lot more tired than I probably would have been if we were in session, because we are working day and night, because we are fighting for democracy, and not just for Texans, but for the entire country. We have talked with lawmakers throughout this country that are thankful to us for what we're doing, because some of them aren't necessarily in situations where a quorum break would even be possible. So along with that, when it comes to communicating with our constituency, we are very active on social media. I answer all DMs on all social media platforms. We're doing Instagram Lives, we are doing Facebook Lives. We obviously had our MSNBC town hall on Monday. So the one thing that we don't have to talk about is us working, because that is not up for debate. And we will continue to work until this bill is killed, and we will deal with the next chapter when we get there.
Thank you very much, Representative Crockett, and thank you all for being with us today as we mark the halfway point in this special session, and we look forward to visiting again next week. Thank you.